بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Imam Didmar, and I'm going to go over today on some important matters in regards to fasting the month of Ramadan. There are two words, technical words, that we need to know the meaning of these words. Number one is fidya, and number two is Kaffārah, or expiation. Now, what is the difference between these two? Sometimes people, they do not know these differences, therefore it's important to have the right understanding. When it comes to fidya is a person who simply is unable to fast. It is not, that person may not be temporarily ill, but the person may be permanently ill, and because of that the person needs to feed 30 people in one day, twice a day, so morning and evening meal, or it could be suhoor and also iftar, or the person can feed 30 people in one day and give these two meals. Again, that is done because the person is unable to fast and has a medical excuse for that. Sometimes I get people saying like, oh, I cannot stop smoking, therefore I'm going to feed the people, and that doesn't work like that. It works only when somebody is sick or has an excuse. Now, what is the Kaffārah? Kaffārah is the expiation, as we mentioned, when a person is normal, does not have a medical excuse, but all of a sudden decides to break the fast. For example, eat or drink or have intimate relations with his partner, or it could be vice versa, and then all of a sudden the fasting is gone. The person needs to make up for that fast, and the person needs to also pay or feed people. Okay, what are the rules in regards to expiation? How many people he needs to feed and all that? So expiation, first of all, according to a hadith of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam that comes to us from Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, a man came to the Prophet and he said, "O Prophet of God, I was involved in an intimate relation with my wife today, and it was a fasting day, and it seemed that this person did it knowingly. If a person does it unknowingly, then fasting continues, it's okay. But when a person does it knowingly, then the fasting is gone. But not only that, the person needs to also give or perform the expiation." So this is where we learn the procedure. Prophet said, then go ahead and free a slave. And the person said, no, I can't, I don't have the money for that. And then Prophet ﷺ asked him to fast for 60 consecutive days. This is also another thing that a person can do. I cannot do that either, he said. Well, then you have to feed 60 people, 60 poor people, if that's the case, morning and evening, like twice a day. And he said, I cannot do that either. And anyways, the hadith, the story goes on, it's a little bit longer, but this is where we learn from this hadith that you can either free a slave, which is not relevant nowadays, but here you can see, by the way, we can stop and we can see that Islam emphasizes, and it did emphasize back then, on freeing the slaves, when this was something not familiar and not encouraged in many parts of the world until even a few hundred years ago. So this is very important lesson to learn from this hadith. But also, as I said, we learn these three different categories that if a person wants to take care of this expiation, has to either fast 60 consecutive days, or feed one person for 60 days twice a day, or feed 60 people one day twice a day. Now, that's what Kaffārah is, and we also mentioned earlier about fidya, what fidya is, so we have an understanding of these two terms. Now, there are times when an individual who fasts can break the fast, but is only required to make up for that day. And there are times when the individual breaks the fast, but it is required not only to make up for that day that he or she missed, but also to either pay for these 60 people or fast 2 consecutive months. And we're going to learn from the book Nurul Idah of Imam Shurumulali those cases when a person breaks the fast and is not required for expiation, and we're going to also learn about when the person is required to give the expiation. So let's start first that which nullifies the fast without requiring expiation. And Imam Shurumulali here in his book Nurul Idah, he gives us an example. He says when a person, for example, swallows a paper, or when a person swallows raw rice, I would say even a seed, for example, a seed that does not get dissolved in the body. Paper does not get, it's not nourishment. Seed does not get dissolved. It can be, for example, watermelon seed, the way how it comes in, it gets out. So it's not going to give nourishment. So even though intentionally, knowingly you ate that, you're required to make it up later on, but you don't have to pay expiation or to fast 60 consecutive days because you have broken the fast. So that is the general idea there. Imam Shurumulali also highlights a very important point, which is if a person either breaks his fast by eating and drinking knowingly, then that person needs to not only make up for that day, but also give expiation. So intimate relations or drinking or eating knowingly. So that's going to require making up and also expiation. Now, let's say somebody broke fasting by intentionally eating today during Ramadan, and then that person did not perform the expiation, but next Ramadan did the same thing in any days throughout the month. What's the case here? Does the person need to pay or needs to fast for 60 consecutive days for the first year and then another 60 consecutive days for the second year, or one will do for both the cases? And the answer to that one is one will do for both the cases, unless the person has broken the fast intentionally, for example by eating food or having intimate relations or drinking, and then the person has paid for those poor people, or has given them food, or has fasted for 60 consecutive days. Then if that person does it again next year, he needs to or she needs to either fast for 60 consecutive days or feed the poor people. So twice. But if for the first time it was not taken care and it was done again for the second time, then both of them are combined and the person gives once, either feeds the poor people or fasts 60 consecutive days. Okay, so let's go into some details, and I'm not gonna go through all the details that he puts here, all the cases, because a lot of them are irrelevant, and I'm gonna keep it more relevant for the 21st century Muslims nowadays. As we know, when he wrote this book was over 400 years ago, so the time was different back then. He says a person who inserts something like enema from the bottom, or pouring drops of medicine through the nostrils, breaks the fast for sure, but it is not required to do expiation for it. The drip oil into the ears breaks the fast for sure, according to the agreement of the scholars, and the dripping of water into the ears breaks the fast according to the soundest view, when you do it intentionally, not when you go into a pool or into a lake and you're swimming. That's a different story. that doesn't break the fast. But when you intentionally pour water inside your ear, drops, then that's a different case. Again, according to the soundest view when it comes to water, but oil, this is generally speaking, the scholars, they agreed on that one. Now, applying medicine to a wound of the stomach or head, let's say it's open and now the medicine is going inside your body, that breaks the fast but does not require expiation. If rain or snow enters the throat and is swallowed by accident, it does break the fast, but it does not require expiation. And that is, he says, the most correct opinion. If one accidentally breaks his fast with the water used for gargling, in that it seeps down one's throat, then expiation is not imposed upon that person. If one is coerced to break his fast, even if it is through intimate relations, the expiation is not imposed. So the fasting is gone, but there is no expiation. Then Imam Shumbulali brings another explanation here by saying, if a person begins the day as a traveler, though he intended to fast the previous night, like the intention was made in the previous night, but now next day he's traveling, so he intended to fast the previous night, and this resolve did not cease, and then intends residence and thereafter breaks his fast by eating, expiation is not necessary upon him, even though it was forbidden to eat and the person just broke the fast. If a person becomes a traveler after starting the day as a resident, I repeat again, if a person becomes a traveler after starting the day as a resident, so early during the day the person was resident, and then later on, let's say at 12 p.m. the person started driving somewhere, and he became a traveler, and thereafter breaks his fast by eating while he's a traveler, expiation is not imposed upon that person. If a person abstains from eating with no intention of fasting and no intention of breaking fast, like let's say somebody, this is not normal, but there might be some cases out there, it's good to know the ruling in that case. The person doesn't intend to fast, but doesn't intend to break the fast either. So, according to the Hanafis, it's very important that it's a condition, as a matter of fact, for the intention to be made. And I'm not going to go into so many details because it does have a lot of details, but intention is very important. It's a condition when it comes to fasting the month of Ramadan. So, but there is no intention here. That person needs to make that day up. So he doesn't eat, but nor does he make the intention. He needs to make that day up, but there is no requirement for the expiation. If one eats the pre-dawn meal, sahur, or has sexual intercourse during which he has doubt about the rising of dawn, where in reality it had already dawned, so the person doesn't know whether the Fajr has entered or not, but the reality is that the Fajr has already kicked in, then the expiation is not imposed for such person. Like, he didn't keep, or she did not keep in track with the time and kept going on after the azan of Fajr was already made, then there is no there is no fasting for that person. That person needs to make it up, but as we mentioned, there is no need for expiation. The expiation is not imposed if a person breaks his fast believing that the sun had set when it had not. So similarly, when a person eats before the iftar time, thinking that this might be the right time, that person needs to do the fasting in the future, but again, expiation is not required. There is no expiation if a person breaks a fast other than the fast of Ramadan, though one is liable to make up that day. This is according to the Hanafis for sure. So again, if it is outside of Ramadan for any other reason, a person fasts, then let's say intentionally that person ate, knowingly, had no medical excuse or anything like that, but then all of a sudden just broke the fast. That person must, it is wajib as a matter of fact according to the Hanafis, to make up for that day. If it is another, for example, or it has some categories, I don't want to go away from our topic here, but that person for any case does not need to make an expiation. The only thing that the person needs to do is make up for that day. Expiation is not imposed if smoke is intentionally inhaled into the throat, though the fast breaks. Again, smoke, it is, like we said, like paper or like something that has no nutrition. This type of smoke is other than ambar or oud. These two smokes that we just mentioned are there for smell. They give good smell, therefore they don't necessarily break the fast. But we're talking about, let's say, somebody who smokes cigarette. All right, even though the person does it intentionally, is not required. The fasting is gone for sure. There is no doubt about that. Nobody can say, oh, we heard somebody saying that smoking is okay, it's not going to break the fast. That's not the case, but we're saying that the fast will break, but there is no need for that person to, it doesn't require expiation in the future. Vomiting intentionally. We know that vomiting more than a mouthful, it breaks the fast. So even if somebody does it intentionally, which is again not a normal thing to do, but somebody decides to do it, is going to break the fast, but it's not going to require expiation. And this is the most evident view, the Imam says. The Prophet ﷺ said, whomever intentionally vomits must make up the day. So it does not put a clause here. It does not say that expiation is required. Though Imam Abu Yusuf held that in order for the fast to be nullified, the person must deliberately vomit a mouthful, and this is the most correct opinion. Likewise, if a person intentionally returns a mouthful of vomit back inside after it had forcefully risen, and he remembers he is fasting, then he is not liable for expiation while the fast is void, is gone, because it's more than mouthful or more than that. Expiation is not imposed if a person eats the food that is stuck between his teeth, the size of a chickpea or more than that. Again, unfortunately, there might be some people out there who may not wash their mouth, but if it is a food that is the size of the chickpea or even more that stayed in the mouth, then the person has no fast for that day. Needs to make that up. No expiation is required. If it is less than that, then it doesn't break the prayer at all. If a person intended to form his intention of fasting in the day, but he eats forgetfully before making his intention in the day, then he is not liable for expiation. If one becomes unconscious, for example, suffering from fainting, even for the entire month of Ramadan, then he is given the status of that of a sleeping person and is liable for the missed days, except the actual day in which one fainted. And if it occurred at night, then one is to make up for the entire period of fainting except the day that follows this night. Again, there's a note here that says that this ruling differs with respect to the insane people. So that's a different story when somebody is insane. If a person suffers from insanity for part of the month, he is to make up the days. And if one suffers from insanity for the entire period of Ramadan, then that person is not liable to make up the days, even if this person is deemed legally insane, such that he only recovers at night from his insanity, or during the day after the time for intention has passed, because one cannot fast at night, and neither after the noontime when the time of intention has ended. I don't think this is a very common example. It's never heard any one of them, who may be like that, but possibly somebody may be like that. Now we're going to talk about what nullifies the fast and requires expiation. In other words, it requires for a person to make up that day and also the expiation after it. There are 22 things, Imam says, which if performed willingly and intentionally without being compelled results in the termination of the fast and requires a compulsory make-up day, Qadā, and expiation, Kaffārah, to atone for violation. They are, he says, number 1, having intercourse. This requires expiation. Again, willingly doing it, this requires expiation. Eating or drinking, whether it is for nourishment or for a medicinal benefit, this will break the fast and it will require Kaffārah. But this is not according to the Shafi'is. They hold a different position. To swallow rainwater after it enters the mouth. A person who does it is doing it intentionally, even though you're not drinking from a cup or from from somewhere, but it's coming from the sky, and you doing it intentionally is as you're drinking water from a cup. Eating raw meat, even if it is damaged. Now, somebody may say, well, it's even if it has less nutrition, it has been for a long time, God knows what, but that will not only break your fast, it will require the person to make expiation for that. He says also here, eating the fat or grease of meat nullifies the feast and requires expiation and Qadā. And this is the opted view according to Imam Abi Layth. Eating jerked or cured meat, again this breaks fast, requires expiation. Eating a seed of wheat or chewing it and then eating it. Again, eating a seed of wheat. Why? Because this has nutrition. Or chewing it and then eating it. It breaks the fast and makes one liable for expiation and a make-up day, except if the seed is chewed and constantly melts away. In other words, it does not go through the throat. You chew it, it is melted, it stays in the mouth, but it's not going to the throat. That is okay. If one swallows a seed of wheat, sesame, or something of the like, things from outside the mouth, meaning that they're not stuck between the teeth and were not put in the mouth and swallowed, the fast breaks and one is liable for expiation and a make-up day. And this is the preferred view, given that such things are deemed nourishment. Eating a small amount of salt. A lot of people may say, like, well, that doesn't have much nourishment in it, but even if it is a small amount of salt, is going to require expiation and Qadā, or make-up for that day. There are some more explanations in regards to that one, but we're going to pass, and we're going to get into if a person intentionally eats after backbiting. This is interesting. If a person intentionally eats after backbiting, or eats after being subjected to cupping, or after touching his wife, or after kissing with desire, or after sleeping near his wife. So let me go back again and talk about this one. Intentionally eats after backbiting. Now, when a person backbites during fast, that doesn't break the fasting. Though a person may not receive the rewards of fasting, but the person has fulfilled the obligation, which is to fast. But a person may think that, okay, I was backbiting during the day and now my fast is gone and now, Bismillah, let's go ahead and eat. So that requires not only Qadā to make up for that day, but also requires expiation. And he also mentions now the other categories which fall under the same understanding, or subjected to cupping, hijama. Hijama doesn't break the fast, but the person who may think that does so, he needs to also, he or she is liable for expiation. Or touching his wife, or kissing with desire, or after sleeping near his wife, touching and kissing her without ejaculating. So the person, because he was near his wife and maybe kissed his wife, thought that this is going to break the fast, but in reality it does not break the fast. And we have examples from the life of the Prophet ﷺ with his wife Sayyidatuna Aisha. So this doesn't break the fast. The person is responsible for the expiation and also the Qadā. The expiation, however, which excuses the expiation, is if he is given a legal ruling by a scholar. This is very important. Why? Now, if a scholar tells him that such a thing is going to break fast and you have to make up for it, then the person is responsible. But if a scholar tells him that you doing hijama, I don't know what kind of scholar would that be, but somebody who may not know and just jumps into giving an answer or giving a fatwa, and says that, well, you did hijama, blood was drawn out of your body, therefore you need to, the fasting is gone. In that case, a person who eats after doing hijama because he heard another person who he trusts and thinks that he knows what he's talking about, then in that case the person only is responsible to make up for that day and not necessarily expiation. Again, why? The reason is because the person just relied on that person and he just gave him the wrong answer, thought that he was a scholar or a learned imam or whatever the case may be. The person is not reliable for expiation in that case. And this is it when it comes to things that are considered to break the fast and also require expiation. There is also but we're gonna skip this inshallah, but let's just keep it here for tonight. We learned about these important aspects of fasting. Again, to wrap it up, we learn about fidya, we learn about Kaffārah, we learn about when you